Hey, what's up everybody? It's Mike from Cornfield Customs and welcome back to the Cornfield Customs channel. On this week's episode, we're going to continue on working on the 51 Ford convertible, and that means more patterns. Just kidding. We are going to take the patterns and the blanks that we cut out in the previous episodes and we're going to get to shaping. So stick around as we make that happen and see how they come out. We're here at the layout table, and here is the pattern and panel from episode 1, and that's the panel we're going to start with. We have all the other 4 pieces laid out in total. Everything's patterned. We did one of the pieces in episode 2, and like I said, I came through and I went ahead and patterned everything that was similar so you guys didn't get burned out on seeing very similar patterns made 4 times over. Patterning can be really boring, but I wanted to show you and keep this series somewhat short, but go through the entire process of patterning, roughing the panel in, shaping everything, and moving forward on getting your panels to fit the car or the project you're working on. So, like I said, we're gonna start with the first panel that we patterned in episode 1. So we're going to look at our notes on our pattern and our part. So we have to do a little bit of shrinking at the top and then a little bit of stretching at the bottom. So for me, I want to start with the shrinking. To do that, we're going to head over to the MH37 HD power hammer, which I do pretty much all of my shaping work on. For you guys that are new to the channel, that's pretty much it. I do all of my shrinking, my linear stretching, my radial stretching on this machine for the most part. So for doing the linear stretch on this panel, we're probably not going to use the MH37 just because it hits so hard even with the stroke turned down. It just needs a little bit of stretch to get that reverse out where the spear is. So we'll most likely use our Pettingell number 1 when we get to that. And I leave this set up as a dedicated linear stretch machine. So this is probably what we'll use when we get to the linear stretch, but we have to take this and convert it from linear stretch to shrink. So we're going to change the tooling out, put in our thumbnail dies, and get ready to shrink this panel over. So let me grab the tripod, we'll get everything switched around, and we can get to shaping. We're here at the hammer, so I'm going to pull this handle, which drops our lower tool post down, and we'll take our tooling wrench, and we'll pop out the linear tooling I had in here from a different job, and we'll throw it back in the rack. And I'm going to run our mid-size set of our thumbnail dies. We need a decent amount of shrink, but not as much as the large thumbnail dies put out. So we're going to run with the mids, and that was the female die. Here's the male section of our thumbnail die. And what the thumbnail die is for you new viewers is it is going to put a tuck in the material where we laid out we need a shrink, just like our pattern. So it's going to tuck, and then as it comes out, it's going to gather the material, sliding the atoms and the grains together, making the material thicker, creating a shrink. So we'll pull the handle again, raise our lower tool post up, and we'll manually roll the machine around to the bottom of its stroke. And then we're going to bring our tool gap down. There's a hand wheel on this side for the tool gap. We'll go ahead and turn our stroke up just a little bit here. So we're going to run about 2.5 on our stroke, and I adjusted the hand wheel here, and we're going to bring the tool gap down to 3/16 to 1/4 inch, and we'll double check that we're at the bottom of our stroke, and that should look pretty good. So the machine is set up, and now I just have to turn everything on, get some gloves, hearing protection, and we can come in and start the shrinking process. All right, machine is all set up. I got my gloves laid here. I got my earmuffs laid here for when we're ready to start shaping. But first, we will go ahead and do a little bit of a recap. So we're gonna come in everywhere we had noted a shrink line, which is SH, if you remember from episode 1. If you haven't watched episode 1 and 2, you might wanna go back and check those out first so you have a better understanding of how we got to this point. But we're gonna come in, shrink down to this light line, which is where the radius starts to change to come up around the top. And that'll be our first set of shrinks. And then we will come back and we will shrink to our peak line, which is at the top of the quarter where it comes over and it breaks the center point and comes back around. So we'll do those sets of shrinks, and then we will compare it to the car, and we can check it with gauges and stuff if need be, but that'll get us the initial roughed-in shape with our shrinks, and then we can change the machine around and come back in and start doing any of our low crown work, and then we'll switch over to the Pettingell to do the linear stretch at the bottom for our reverse curve. So there is our first shrink. You can see that it's kind of brought it in and peaked this up both ways. I'll do one over here and I'll put the tuck in, and before hammering it out, I'll show the camera so you guys can check it out. So let's put one in and not close it. So there is our tuck on the line where we're gonna put, where we wanna shrink that in. So we'll put it back in the machine and we will close the tuck. And there it is after it's closed. We're just gonna repeat that process as noted. Most likely we're gonna have to adjust the form because currently it has more form this direction than it should and not enough this direction. So we'll adjust the form over the table just to get this peak a little bit more defined, and then we can go ahead and start checking it on the car. But first, we gotta do these last few shrinks and we'll be ready to adjust the form. All right, so like I previously mentioned, we've got all of the shrink work roughed in to see how it fits, but hopefully you guys can see there's a lot more form this way than there is this way, but knowing it on the car, it should be more form this way, kind of up and peaked over at this line, and lower crown this way. So looking at it, you might think it needs more shape, but it's actually form, and form is just bending and correcting the way the shape looks based on those bends. So by coming in, and we're gonna lay the edge over this corner on the table, right where the peak line is, I'm gonna push down and adjust the form to get that to break over, and it'll flatten this out. So one of the hardest things in metal shaping is figuring out if it's a form issue or a shape issue. I always lean to the side of shape because shape is easily done and undone. You're not changing the surface area, you're not changing the metal thickness. It's the same thing as bending it over your leg. You can put that form in and take it back out. While if you're trying to correct it with shape and you're wrong, it's a lot harder to put shape in and take it back out accurately. So I always err on the side of adjusting the form first, because that's easily done and undone. So let's lay this over the corner of the table, and I'm just gonna use my body weight to kind of push that peak around. And you can see that the peak is breaking more, and it's helping to flatten this out a little bit. So from here, I'm just gonna check it to the car. We'll kind of see how things are looking and make any shrink adjustments as needed. At this point, I'm just gonna lay the panel on top and kind of see how we're looking. Like here, you can see the form is still off, but we haven't done anything in this area yet other than put these initial shrinks in. So I'm not too pressed about it, but I'm trying to line up where our peak is. And here you can see, well, I'll bring it actually down so you can see it, but it comes straight off. It doesn't have that nice roll in. So we're going to just double check that to make sure that I'm not reading into something more, but I think I need to come in and put a few more shrinks here. To get this to roll in. But to verify that, I'm gonna get our adjustable radius gauge, and we're gonna check the other side at this peak line, and then we'll check it to our panel and see how it looks. That way we have a good reference point, and I'm not just eyeballing it. That's how we're going to get it to be symmetrical side to side, is checking with sweeps and gauges. So let's get that gauge, we'll check it to the other side and check it to our part. Back on the passenger side, I have our adjustable radius gauge. I just rotate it around so the knobs are at the top, easier to get to. But we're just gonna be a little bit below the peak here. And lay it on the panel, tighten these down, and make sure it stays. So now we have our radius we need, and we'll check it against what we've got so far on the panel. At the panel, on the bench, just laying it approximately here, you can see there's a gap here I can stick my finger under. So that's pretty much right where I did these lines. And if we shrink that, it's gonna pull it together, which is gonna push that side up. So I'm gonna go back to the power hammer and we'll shrink this edge a little bit more, and that'll pull that up. I'll move the camera in before I do that so you can see that gap and see how I'm gonna adjust it. You can see there that it's pretty close. And then when we get to here, it doesn't have that drop. And it's not that the panel is flat and this gauge goes up, it's more that it's hitting here where the panel drops down and it's pushing the gauge up. So like I said, as this gets shrunk, it's gonna bring that together, drop this edge down, which will push this edge up, and it'll create that more aggressive compound shape here at the back. So we're gonna go back to the power hammer, shrink on our blue lines here, and that should tighten everything up. And then we'll check it against the gauge and check it on the car again. After our first set of shrinks to come in and tighten these lines up, you can see that gap's a little bit better. We still need more shrinking there. So we'll come back and we'll do another set, and just right where the blue lines are, we'll do another set of shrinks and we'll check it again and come back. And this might be a multiple process or a multiple step process. You don't want to get too carried away and put too much shrink, because like I mentioned, it's a lot of work to put shape in and also a lot of work to take shape out accurately versus just form or creeping up on the desired shape of the panel. So I always err on the side of creeping up on it so we don't have to take that shape back out. Another set of shrinks down, and it's a lot closer. I'm not going to get super carried away because you can see that it hits here where we have a big shrink where there's kind of a knot. This fits pretty decent, and it fits pretty decent here. It's just a little bit low, but if I bring that out a little bit closer to the edge here, it's even closer. So when we blend all of this out, I think that'll kind of raise that up a little bit, let this fall over. And at this stage, we're just roughing everything in, trying to get it close, and then we'll come back and we'll make little gauges to check and verify and get everything dialed in. So let's head over to the car. We can check and see how it fits and flows with the car. And if everything's looking pretty good, we can go ahead and put our radial tooling in the power hammer. So just holding that up, there's a little bit of a twist in the panel, which again is just a form problem. But here it looks pretty good for now. So this needs to push in. So we'll just kind of grab it with our foot. And adjust that form and bring that in a little bit. And as we put our radial stretch in here and start blending that out, I think that'll help out quite a bit. And here is a little bit more of a form just on this corner. So we can roll it down. And we're a lot closer. Again, I think that's form because I can clamp it with my hands and push everything kind of into place. So to me, that's going to be form, but I want to blend all of this out before we get super carried away with it. And we'll head back over to the hammer. We'll change our tooling out, get this kind of blended up, and see how things are looking from there once this is more in a relaxed state from the radial stretch and blending. Going to change the tooling around, so we'll drop the tool post out of the way. Go ahead and pull our thumbnail dies out of the machine, and we are going to run a flat upper tool. So we have the flat master at the top. Then we're going to run a 36-inch radius lower at the bottom. And I'll talk about that here in a minute as to why we're using a 36 versus a different radius. But let me get this put in here and everything adjusted, and we'll kind of go from there. So raise tool post up, go to the bottom of our stroke, adjust our tool gap. I'm pretty happy with where our stroke is at 2.5. So we'll throw our thumbnail dies back. I'll grab the panel and we can talk about why I chose that radius. So with our panel, here it's a 12-inch radius and here it's a 4-inch radius. But you might be thinking, well, we put a 36 radius in there. Why does that make any sense? Well, it's not 12 this way and this way, and it's the same thing with 4. It's not 4 this way and that way. The 4 and the 12 are dictated by the form, which we're going to put in here. But if you remember, when we made the pattern in episode 1, this direction, the shape was less than 36-inch radius based on our radius gauge. So we want to use the lowest crown anvil or lower tool that we can to clean up this shape, because the flatter or lower crown it is, the more surface area it's going to have, and it's going to get our panel smoother. So we're going to use this 36 to come in, blend all of this out, put some initial low crown shape in, because it's lower than 36 this way, but our form should be around 12 to 4. And if that becomes an issue, with form being easy to put in and take out, we could bend this back, take the form out, and get it even flatter. So we might end up doing that, but let's see how it looks once we start blending it out. We're not doing a ton of stretching, we're just blending out these highs and lows from where our shrinks were, getting everything smooth in between, and we'll go from there. So we're gonna focus in the 12, the 4, our shrunk areas, and this flange a little bit to get everything blended out. Going to turn the stroke down just a little bit and continue blending this out. Now with our panel here, you can see a lot of this stuff is blended out. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have all the big knots and lumps and bumps in it. So we are still in the roughed out phase at this point, but just want to check and see how things are looking. So if we come over and we put it on the car, the form of our peak here needs to be adjusted and brought over. And I think we're going to need a little bit more shrink here in this corner to get that to dive around. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and start putting our linear stretch in here. That way we can see how that affects the form and shape of the panel. So we'll head over to the Pettingell, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on, and we'll start shaping on that hammer. We're here at the Pettingell #1 power hammer. So this is an original 1909 Pettingell #1. This is what we're going to be using to do our linear stretch. And you can see here that I have linear stretch tooling in the machine. The reason we're going to use this one, I mentioned, but we'll dive a little bit deeper. The reason we're going to use this machine versus the MH37 is even with the MH37 dialed all the way down, it still hits pretty hard and can easily overstretch the areas we're wanting to work in. So I've said it multiple times in this video, I want to creep up onto the shape and not get too carried away too quickly. So the number 1, it has a much lighter hit than the 37 does, so that's why we're going to use it. So there's actually a lot of really cool history with this machine. I'll touch on it a little bit, but I do have a video on this channel that talks in depth about it. It's a Pettingell number 1 from 1909 to 1912-ish. We don't know the exact year, but there were some defining characteristics that were only made from 1909 to 1912 on the original number 1s. And from there, it was bought by the E.A. Kinsey Machinery Company. The Pettingell tag was knocked off. They put their own tag on, and it was sold to the Bellevue Brewing Company in downtown Cincinnati. They closed in 1918 from Prohibition, and then I got the hammer in 2017. So it'd been hanging in that building untouched for all those years. It's just a neat piece of local history, and we're gonna put it to use. So we'll get it turned on. I've got it running through a VFD up to the gear reduction motor at the top, and we will put in our linear stretch based on the layout that we put on with the pattern. So I'll get you guys put back on the tripod and we will get to shaping on the Pettingell. So what's gonna happen with our linear stretch is we are going to stretch with the die facing our stretch line, but we're gonna move left to right. And as that die comes down, it's gonna have a line contact patch, and the material is gonna spread outward left to right of that contact patch and line on our panel. So we'll have it set up in the machine will be going, and we'll be working this way, but it'll stretch the material out, and as it comes out, it has to have somewhere to go, so it'll start to fan up. And that's how we're gonna get that linear stretch, which will create our reverse curve. So get it turned on, and we will get to shaping. So we didn't need a ton of linear stretch, and again, that's why I wanted to use the Pettingell, because it does a really good job with doing just a little bit of linear stretch when adjusted all the way down. So I don't know if you guys can see it there, but it fans up in 2 different directions. That gives us our reverse. So reverse has shape opposing one another, unlike a compound shape, which is the same direction. So from here, we're gonna have to adjust the form on this, and I'll end up using the wheeling machine with a rubber coated upper to adjust the form in our reverse section here. So we'll head over there, put in that form, and then we can check it to the car and we can start making adjustments. So again, we're just looking for roughed in fitment at this point, and then we can build and correct the shape as we go from there. We're not looking for a direct clip fit part at this stage. Metal shaping is not take your pattern, do all your shape work, clip fit, done. It is a lot of refinement and fine tuning and getting the shape dialed in. Even at this point, we haven't even made specific contour gauges to check to see how close we are on all of our radii. We're just getting everything roughed in, blended as a solid starting point to where we can refine the shape as we go. So let me get the wheeling machine set up. I'll take you guys over there. We will wheel in that reverse, and we can check fit this to the car once again. We're here at the wheeling machine. We're gonna leave the rubber coated upper at the top, and we're gonna take out our 36-inch lower radius that was from another job, and we're gonna come in and we're gonna put our 2-inch radius lower in the bottom. And that is the closest radius to that section where the spear comes through and we'll be able to put that form in. So how the rubber-coated upper wheel works, for you guys that are fresh to the channel, the rubber doesn't have a hard enough surface or a hard enough durometer rubber to create any shape. We're just going to take the bottom anvil, push it up into the rubber, and that will give us our form. Same thing we've been talking about with form is just bending, and it can be done and easily done. We're not changing the metal thickness, and we're not changing any surface area. We're just using the rubber-coated upper as a consistent, controlled radius. So I'll grab the panel, we'll adjust that form a little bit, and then we can check it to the car. We have our panel, and I'm gonna lower the wheel down a little bit because we don't want a ton of pressure. We're just trying to achieve a little bit of form. So we'll just creep up on it a little bit, and we're just wheeling right across this blue reference point that I marked, and it's in the same spot as the blue line on the front. So we're just working up to that, putting a little bit of form in there. And once we get that form in, I'll bring the panel over to the camera so you guys can see it a little bit better. So hopefully you guys can see that, is that we're putting that little bit of form in there. And it's not a lot. It's not a lot of form, and it's not a lot of shape. That's why we're just taking our time, not getting too carried away. One of the biggest things with metal shaping, and I teach this in my classes, is you have to be patient. Too many people want to rush through and get that instant gratification and that instant part. Well, that's not really what metal shaping is. Metal shaping is slow, precise movements and getting everything put where it needs. And I've said it in a few of these videos that if you're going to move with a purpose. If you're just rushing through stuff, rushing makes mistakes, and then you will have to undo and redo what you're working on. So here we've got the form adjusted, and you can see, I mean, it was just barely any pressure on the tooling. So now we can go over and we can check this to the car and see where we need to make any shape or form adjustments to this point. Let's test fit this to the car and see how things are kind of coming around. So everything's going to be oversized, so keep that in mind. But you can see that this little reverse here has helped bring this section in, and we're touching here, and we do, remember, we added 3/4 of an inch, so it's going to stick out a little bit beyond, and we're hitting here. So I might need to let some of that shape go or adjust the form. And up through here, it looks pretty decent looking through the inside. I'm gonna make some contour gauges and check here, because I remember that this was a weird spot to get shaped on the other quarter. And I think I had to use a little bit of mallet work and block that in, just because we're going from a reverse into a compound shape to get that blending just right. So I'll grab a couple spring clamps, see if I can clamp this into place, and then I can bring the camera in and show you how it's looking. All right, so you can see what I was talking about here. This is still up a little bit, and here it makes contact. So I need to adjust the form there first. I can peel that up, which will allow this to relax down a little bit into place. And this coming up will allow that to fall down as well. And everything else is looking somewhat decent in the roughed in stage. So we can adjust this once we get the other pieces made and keep refining the shape. And right here is what I was talking about, where it's kind of funky because it goes from this light reverse into a compound shape. And if we look at the other side, you can see how it does that. Hopefully you guys can see it. It's kind of tough to capture it in the camera, but it kind of fades in and out right here. So we might have to block that in with a mallet. But from here, it's just going to be the starting of panel refinement. And it's going to be a series of light shrinks, stretches, planishing, blending, and wheeling with the rubber-coated upper to adjust the form. So the initial roughing in phase is the quick and dirty part of metal shaping. It's all about the refinement and planishing and getting our light lines, our reflections, and our surface dialed in that make or break a panel. So like I said, this is the quick and dirty part. Now it's going to be hours and hours worth of refinement and detail work to get it to a completed panel. So I'm gonna get busy with that. I'll show some of it probably in the next episode, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut this episode off just because I don't want it to get so long and drawn out that it turns boring. And I think the most important thing at this stage for you guys is to see how the initial shaping was done, and then we will continue in the next episode with more panel refinement as things go. So hopefully this was informational. If you haven't watched episode 1 and 2 in this series yet, I highly recommend you check it out because the pattern is going to give us all the information that we're using to shape these parts. So make sure to check those out if you haven't done so. Drop down in the comment section. Let me know what you think of this video or the series. Share it on Facebook, tell a friend. Anything that can help grow this channel is greatly appreciated. And I'm really trying to focus on a lot more super detailed, informational type videos to get you guys the information you need. So thank you guys so much for checking out this video as well as many of our others. And stick around for future stuff. And we will catch you on the next one.